Welcome to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast, providing business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs with the 3 INs: insights, inspirations, and intentional actions. Delivered through monologues and dialogues, we address topics like leadership, productivity, time management, work-life balance, and challenges like stress, conflict, mental health, and much more. Please do not hold back from suggesting specific topics and guests you would like on this podcast. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. And this week again is a week where I have a guest on, and it's a privilege for me to have Derek here from actually the opposite side of the planet. So Derek, welcome, and tell me and our audience a bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, McCall. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is it's always fun for me to do these type of podcasts. And so yeah, it's a thrill, and thank you. A little bit about me, as you can hear it in my accent. I'm assuming that sounds like some kind of a lazy accent. I don't know what it sounds like to people elsewhere in the world, but I grew up in California, specifically in a coastal town, on the beach called Santa Cruz, California. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father was one of those guys that just couldn't quite conform to societal norms. At the time in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a lot of, kind of counterculture things happening in the United States. When I was born, he decided to start a company just in his garage that I grew up around. It still exists today, 50 years later, where it was the way he framed it for me when I was young was a way for him to earn enough to support his family, but allow him enough free time to actually enjoy his family. And so he never had aspirations to have some big company with lots of employees and things like that. It was more about just supporting a lifestyle that he really appreciated, was very kind of family centric, and really enjoyed the free. He worked hard, but he also took time off just to be with us, my brother and I, and my mom. So growing up in Santa Cruz was it's a wonderful place in so many ways. And yet it also has its rough kind of underbelly, like a lot of California surf towns. There's a lot of drugs and, kind of counterculture things that just still exist that are just, there's a lot of, it's fun, but there was a lot growing up. I was the kind of kid that didn't necessarily love to sit still in school and had a hard time making it through through traditional education. And in high school was really struggling with, sitting through these hour-long blocks of curriculum that just wasn't very interesting to me. And, I was one of those guys that would say, like, just give me the test and, I'll get my grade on the test. But I didn't want to do the homework. And unless there was some version of conversation, of a student teacher kind of back and forth or group discussion, I usually wasn't that interested. And so I had found my way into an arts class that was taught by a very, very well-known artist. Just happened to love to teach, but he was trained by some very quite famous American artists. And he noticed that I was struggling to, make it through school. And he said, look, before you cut class and leave campus, just come here to the art classroom. And he had a back area. There was the main classroom, but there was another room that he had turned into an art studio for kids that maybe had some talent in art, and or for some of us that had both that as well as the proclivity to want to leave school. And he said, just come here and paint. I'll go talk to the other teachers, let them know that you're still here, you're still learning. And he taught art history and the theory of color, and it went into things that had to do with mathematics. And, art history weaves right into, world history. And there was a lot of learning beyond just the practice of art and painting, which was my medium. And so long story short, that teacher really helped me get through high school. And I had another teacher that was very similar to that. That there was a architectural drafting teacher, which I found by taking architectural drafting, I would not need to take math classes because I got credits from the architectural drafting. And that led me to an internship in my senior year for one of the major architectural firms in the area, which opened my eyes to the fact that I didn't necessarily want to become an architect. It was just not what I thought it would be. It wasn't as creative as I thought it would be. And so I went into construction. So long story short, I ended up dropping out of my first year of college to travel across the Pacific to Hawaii and begin my construction career in the very booming residential construction industry in Hawaii at the time. And that led me down a now longer road to where I am today, running a construction firm, engineering construction firm in the clean energy space. And so we specifically build clean energy projects, design, engineer, and build clean energy projects. I'm a father, which is probably one of my proudest achievements or accomplishments is being a father to two beautiful boys that are 15 and 17 years old, um, and of course a husband to my wife of nearly 25 years and business partner here in our firm. So I enjoy all that goes along with life with a growing family and running a company that continues to grow every year. But some of my free time is spent, of course, in art. I love to read and spiritual texts, quantum physics, all you name it. I spend a lot of time reading, and then I also spend a fair amount of time in the gym and training Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is one of my passions that I've been involved in for almost 20 years.
Thank you, Derek. Wonderful story there, and I really appreciate that sort of deeper background that you shared with us,
I
and
went in more depth than I intended to. I just kept going.
that's so good. It's perfect. It's perfect. You
Edit
know,
away.
one thing that really stood out to me, and maybe it's because my wife is a teacher and the stories she's telling, and also my own personal experience, because I was struggling at school as well for different reasons, and I didn't get the gift that you got. You got the gift of a
Yeah.
teacher who at some level understood that there's not one way of bringing the best out in students. And then he, I guess, on his own accord, just created that. And my guess is that he would have gotten a lot of fulfillment out of seeing these, maybe some of them riffraffs, coming in and then
Yeah.
suddenly
Yeah.
excelling at doing things. So I just think that is fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's move just to the topic of this podcast is mental fitness. And I love to hear from my guests a couple of stories, ideally of the two different sides of the coin. A story where you ended up in trouble. Like it can be from way back in your teenage, it can be from 2 days ago, it can be anything. Place where you ended up in a place that was not a good place. And the reason you ended up there was because you didn't have at the time the mental fitness to deal with that in a positive way and therefore ended up in whatever kind of situation. The other side of the coin is where you ended up creating some great achievement or a great success, not because it was easy, but because you had the mental fitness to meet the challenges along the way. So you can choose what side of the coin you want to start on and share with us.
Yeah. I, I think I think I may do this in a bit of a reverse order and start with the breakdown where I now looking back see where lack of mental fitness really showed up in a big way for me. But it ties into an earlier, story that leads up to that about mental fitness in a different way being a part of really, I think my something that I'm most proud of. And so I'll start with where I wound up in the deepest, darkest trouble ever in my life was a result of the shutdowns due to the pandemic. And part of why this landed the way it did for me was that um, I had been working for about 8 years, giving everything I had to, sometimes 12, 15 hours a day to growing a company. And my belief in starting a company was beyond just starting something that could make some money, like my dad, or create enough income just to support my family and live a lifestyle. I had a belief that a company could both be a vehicle for transformation in the market, paradigm shift, creating a new way of doing things in the market, in the world, with doing great good for people and planet, but also that a company could be a foundational vehicle for transformation at the personal level for those people that did become members of that company. So the employees, the staff, that the company could become a workshop for people's growth as they chose it to be, right? As they were inspired or wanted it to be. And so I had poured everything in my life experience into this company and starting it and growing it and all the challenges that go into that, only to have what I felt like at the time was the rug being completely pulled out from under us, where at every turn it seemed like the universe was conspiring against us in a way at which, failure was imminent. And it was totally not due to our own mistakes, our own folly. It was based in, all of these things that we're all very well aware of. It was a global pandemic. And I know that everybody has their own story and experience around that. But for us small business owners and operators, managers, it was catastrophic. We work in projects that are associated with commercial buildings, industrial buildings. And so we were being told that, of course, all of the things at the personal level, you can't go out in public or social distancing, or you have to wear a mask, or we can't be in groups and all these things. The challenge for me was that I couldn't get my staff together in the office. Early on, we had gone to great lengths to build an office space that was incredibly collaborative, where we ripped out walls and put in more windows and created views to the outside world from anywhere in the office. And we built it big enough to house probably a 5 times bigger staff than we had at the time, knowing that we would grow into it. And I believe very strongly in the power of people being together, right? That collaborative, that energetic, that dynamic kind of thing that happens when people are together, aligned on a mission or aligned on an intention. And that was just stripped away overnight. It was like, you can't do that. You can't have people together indoors anymore. By the grace of God, we were given the opportunity. If 2 or 3 of our projects at the time were deemed critical infrastructure. One was a food manufacturing plant, and the other was a school that we were able to keep working, and that kind of kept the lights on. And then, of course, we tapped into some other things that financial aid from the government and such that allowed us to kind of keep things going. But it was catastrophic, both at the time, feeling like my life's work was being destroyed essentially. But also for me, looking back, what I was suffering from is the feeling that I was losing my personal freedom. Mm-hmm. And all of us have a different approach to what that is and what that means to them. But I was just raised in a way that was taught a lot about integrity and accountability, personal accountability, but also that a result of that is personal freedom, right? And so that was just a big thing for me. And having that kind of government overwatch and regulations on how we lived our lives. And I was just watching the deleterious effects across. What is that like for children that can't be around other children? What is it like for people of faith that can't go congregate in churches and do those things? It was just, to me, it was just awful. And so I began to go into this kind of what seemed to be a little bit of a depression, but over time it turned into what was really a full-blown mental emotional breakdown. And I didn't know that I was in it, other than I felt miserable and I felt closed in and I felt dark and I felt angry and resentful. And it wasn't until things came back to where we started to get back together in office that my team began to come to me and say, like, hey, this isn't going well. You're being incredibly reactionary. You're obviously very angry. I had begun to use alcohol as a medication of sorts, right? It was the thing I turned to, and that was not helping me emotionally, physically. I had already determined early in my life that wasn't the thing for me. And yet that's what I turned to. It was the only thing I kind of defaulted to. And so I was a mess, just a total mess, to the point at which the people that were closest to me in my life that worked here with us at this company started saying, "Hey, we think you should take some time away. This isn't, going well." And the short version of it is I was introduced by a dear friend to a therapist who turns out, I had no idea at the time, but very hard to get time with them. And I only got in with this person because of this relationship I had with my friend, and a strong recommendation that and this therapist actually is more of a spiritual teacher and uses more of the ancient, maybe call it Buddhist principles, in the work that he does. And I can tell you that it was the hardest thing to go through, not only the way I was feeling, but to also feel like my life's work was being destroyed, but then also my self-worth and value was also being destroyed. And through working with this therapist, who again uses Buddhist, or maybe you might call it Vedanta, or Advaita kind of principles, non-dual principles, began to show me that I was experiencing a process that is actually a beautiful thing, which is the beginnings of the dissolution of ego and the egoic structure. And so working with this person for a couple of years, I began to rebuild, maybe not the identity, but rebuild an understanding of what was actually occurring and finding some solace and peace. But what I realize now, looking back 2 years from kind of a moment where I began to lift my head up a little bit and start to see things a little bit more clearly, I realized that I went into that time, and I'm grateful for it now, but I was totally unprepared. And if I knew then what I now know, I probably would have been okay. I probably would have managed things, or at least understood things at a different level. And so I, for the first time in my life, got a clear picture of what I never understood before when I heard the words depression or mental health. I always wrote that off as really more just weakness, and I didn't judge people, but that's how it landed for me. When I heard that somebody was suffering from mental health issues or depression, it was kind of like, well, just pick yourself up and, figure it out. Well, when you're in it, there's nothing like it. It was hell. I was literally, there was a couple days where I felt, well, this is what must be what hell feels like. And it was all internal, and it was all in between my ears. But thanks to, again, the way things work out, I found a path, and I found some teachings, and I found some practices that relieved me of that, and that allowed me to begin growth in a totally different way, almost a rebirth, almost a completely new person. That now, again, the other side of the story, by gaining those tools and taking them seriously and turning them into a core practice for myself, and then seeking out other teachers, people like yourself, Nicole, to help reinforce and help give me more of that. We have taken what was, ground zero, really, and turned our company back in a few short years into 10 times bigger, better, more dynamic in all the ways that matter, than I had ever imagined it could be. And to the point now where some of these principles that I had to grab onto just to survive the darkest depths that I had ever been through are now part of how we communicate here. It's part of how we work with people in individual ways and teams together. And, it's become part of the fabric of the company, which is incredibly beautiful. And so now, fast forward to not long ago, we had fraud, an event where, there was a fraud where someone essentially got in between the payment for some materials for our company, and essentially stole money from the company. It was a very large sum, large enough to where it would make most people's jaw drop. And And I watched other folks in the company, including my wife, who is head of finance here, really, really go dark. It was a really bad thing and it was really scary. And because I had the tools gained from my experience, I was able to just accept things as they were, notice how things were going, spend more time with people and less time on things that I can't change. No one can change. And which then began to elicit some solutions and began to collectively start to understand A, that we were going to make it as a company regardless, and B, that there's some things we might be able to do about it. But I was very objectively surprised by the fact that if I were to go back in time a few years, I was the kind of person that would have become, murderous over having that kind of sum of money stolen from a small company like this with this kind of hardworking team. And in this case, I was able just to kind of see through all of the all of the challenge and all of the emotion and all of the feelings and stay at a consistent baseline, which I think more than anything was just helpful for others, that they knew that there was somebody here that they could just rely on staying kind of even keel. So I think that that's the most clear. There's so many other examples that I have in my life, but that is a very clear and recent one of both very, very problematic lack of mental fitness, and then the resulting very prominent result of having mental fitness. And again, some of the tools and practices really being the underpinning of that mental fitness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your openness around that. And I really love those kind of stories where it's actually the same story that just continues. And then there's this turnaround of that. I will call it a transformation and that. So, it's just one of those moments where we can look back and say, man, it's great that COVID came along. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had that experience in my life. And you could possibly have had it in other ways too. I'm not saying that it's a great thing COVID came along. But again, I've used the word before, gift. You had a teacher that provided you with a gift, and shit is gonna hit the fan. That's just the way life is. Like we cannot avoid, even if you go and live in a cave on your own, the shit is gonna hit the fan as well. So it's not about, I think, avoiding the shit hitting a fan. I think it is
Right.
more about building enough mental fitness so that when it does hit the fan, we can go, oh, all right, well, I will just go and brush that off
Well,
because it smelled too good. And then look at it as a learning experience. What can I learn? And what can I then bring to the world? So, although you went through all that darkness yourself and you learn in that you learn something, and now look at the gift you have become to others, not just at work, but it will be to your children, to your wife, to your friends, to your community.
yeah, yeah.
What a gift that brings, and it's kind of sad
I
to
mean,
say
the
that,
script.
it has to be bad in order for us to have these, but that's my.
Look, I believe fully that either something's going to happen externally or you're going to create something. I've had times in my life where some deep part of me needed for shit to hit the fan in order for me to grow. And it's funny as we get older, and I turned 50 years old this year, and so I see myself as having maybe a little bit of wisdom compared to when I was younger. This many it's said different ways in many of the different ancient scriptures, but pride cometh before a fall. If I look at the way that I showed up in the world prior to the pandemic, it was that I was big enough and strong enough and tough enough, and I was going to conquer whatever. Yeah, and you know what that was though? That was the ego was that was the image of the ego saw, and the real self was not prepared. The next layer down was not really prepared, or the ego itself was not really prepared for, oh, what happens when all of those strong, tough things don't matter? And I never imagined a world where those things wouldn't matter in helping me through. But sure enough, the pandemic was the thing where there was nothing I could do. There was no matter. It didn't matter how, how tough and strong and whatever I thought I was. So I believe that if we are committed to growth, which I have been since I was young, for one way or another, always believed that I was meant to become something, right, of value. I think that we put ourselves on a path that is certainly going to have innately it's it's the shit's gonna hit the fan
Yeah, no,
because
absolutely.
that's the only way to grow. Pain
Yeah.
is grow, you have to have it to grow, right?
It
And
seems,
Tony Robbins talks about you don't change until there's enough pain where you have to change, and that's certainly true.
absolutely. And I also totally agree with you with that sense is that if there's nothing in the outer world like a pandemic, then if you're on that path of growth, your mind will create those conflicts. It will create something where you hit the wall and then you go, oh crap, and
Yeah.
wake up to that. And just a
Yeah.
couple of other things from what you shared, I would like to just sort of speak into briefly. Um, you mentioned the members of the company, and that really stood out to me because most people all say the staff or the team and that, but that they are members of an organization, of a not just a product, not just a business, but a philosophy and a way of living and a way of doing things. And you build that before the shit hit the fan. And then when it did, because of what you had done in building that, you now had a team that felt okay to come to the
They
book.
did not they did not reinforce my bullshit. They had the mental fitness to do one of the hardest things I can imagine for them
Mhm.
was to sit the CEO down and say, "You're fucked up. This is not working, right?" And man, that was rough. It was really rough for them. It was really rough for me. But to your point, I'll do you even one better. Not just an organization with members. I've come to conclude that a good organization really actually is an organism. And the organism, if you think of the culture of a company, let's say, or the culture of any organization, is really a little bit like that membrane around the cells in an organism. And it will reject the things that aren't healthy for it, and it will let in the things that are. And I have, as I contemplate this company as it continues to grow and mature and become even better at serving as many people in a positive way in the world, it functions like an organism. And if you think of it as an organization with structure and all of the things, you can do that, but it limits your ability to understand its natural path of evolution
Mhm.
until you start to see it as an organism that has a life unto itself. That is, it's got to be fed and it's got to have room to grow and it has to be uh, challenged. It has to have some environmental stresses for it to need to grow. And so, yes, I do. I have always had a tough time saying the word employees
Mhm.
because in my opinion, I'm an employee too, right? Yeah, I'm a founder and CEO, but I also am just an employee to a bigger thing, which is the organization itself.
Mhm.
And I ask myself frequently, am I bringing the value that I should to this organization, to this organism? Am I a valuable member? Am I a healthy cell in this body? And
Mhm.
if not, I need to question. I need to really look carefully at that. And oftentimes, it just requires that I reorient to what is my highest purpose, both
Mhm.
personally, because I find that my personal purpose tends to be a guiding light to where I do my best work for
Mhm.
this organization.
Mhm.
And so, as soon as you start talking about employees and managers and things like that, you lose the context that we are all equally valuable, just in
Mhm.
different ways. And we all have unique talents and superpowers and we all have weaknesses. And if you do it right, one person's weakness is another person's strength, and you can build teams around that. And but certainly I agree. Yes, I'm glad that you caught that. It's a very important thing to me.
Mhm. I love that, that bringing in is not just an organization. It's like an organism. Like that's such a beautiful picture to me because everything within that is important and it has its place and it has its value. And I think that that's really
Balance,
important.
symbiosis.
Hmm.
Yep,
And
yep.
the other thing
If
you
nature
also
is a great.
mentioned, the other thing you also mentioned is that when the members came to you and sat you down and say, "Hey, Derek, like." this is not working. Eh? They needed to have a very high level of mental fitness to pull that off.
Yeah.
And again, credit to you for part of building that, and credit to them for being willing to be part of that organism. Because for many people, that wouldn't be easy. It would be much easier to go and work in a company down the road where somebody's just telling them what to do, and they can go home at 5 o'clock and collect their money, and then have a life
Yeah.
outside
Or
of
I,
that. So it's not right or wrong. It's just a different style. And I honor you.
Well, I can imagine that there's some companies where if you were to sit the CEO down, the founder of the company, and say, "Look, this isn't going well. This isn't working. You might need to take time away. Are you sure you even want to be here anymore?" They would be at risk of being fired.
Mhm.
I mean, the idea that that probably wasn't on anybody's mind. You
Mhm.
know, certainly they were worried what my reaction would be like, but I don't think anybody was worried that they would lose their job. Um, and so, yes, you're right. Their mental fitness, based in some of the principles that we started the company with, and then the culture continued to reinforce and foster over time, I think allowed for them to do what was probably one of the tougher things that they ever had to do in this company, but also probably one of the greatest gifts to me because I may have ended up in even more and I was incredibly self-destructive at the time, and that was the one thing of all the things in the world, that was the one thing that was I was not willing to give up in the process of my self-destructive behavior. And that was the respect and love of these people at this company. That was the one thing that threatened my existence more so than my own, really my own health and wellness. That mattered more to me. And it was the thing that triggered a turnaround, or the beginning of a turnaround, which meant sobriety, which meant seeking help in mental health, and then seeking a spiritual practice, and then seeking deeper connection, then seeking to find what is the reason that I started this company? What is the reason that I'm here on this planet? What am I meant to do? Why do I exist? And then how to reframe things in a way at which I could live to um, my highest purpose, right? And that
Mhm.
this company could evolve to its highest purpose.
Mhm.
All came from a bloody, ugly scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, it did, and it didn't. It came from a whole lifetime of experiences that you had built up that then got challenged and going, oh,
Yeah.
so is that really who I am? And it's like, oh shit, maybe I'm not who I think I am. That's what they call the ego. Now I know what that is. Ooh, I better do something about that and that. So you've already mentioned, and several things or a number of things that you have done to build your mental fitness, which is kind of my next question. So you don't need to repeat all those things. I'm just looking, is there anything else that comes to mind for you? Things like it might be a
Yes.
certain book or a movie you watched or a practice you've had for years or like something that you think our audience could benefit from hearing that they might want to take on to some degree.
I'm going to go with, I have so many thoughts. I'm going to go with two things. This is such a great question. Two things that I think I rely on very much. And that is that I've come to learn that the body and the mind are not two separate things. You are an organism that is interconnected. I do think that our highest self is maybe I don't want to say separate, but it's having the experience of a body and a mind. But let's just talk in practical terms. And why I bring this up is that I found that when we go dark or when things get bad, we tend to give up on the things that seem frivolous or inconsequential, but they are really, really fundamental, like exercise, like getting out in nature, like human connection, right? And so for me, getting to the gym, and working this body, this machine, and getting to the dojo and training with people in in martial arts does all of that. It creates the heart's pumping and you're moving, and I think movement has always been a part of human existence. We move, we dance, we mock, fight, we all these things. We build, we run, we do all, we hunt. And all of those things are partially stimulating the mind at the same time they're stimulating the body. For me, I found that that is for me, this is an incredibly important part of how I stay balanced. And again, balance is becoming a more and more prominent thing in my focus these days, is how to find balance. And so I would argue that don't forget, yours might be stretching, it might be yoga, it might be a walk, it might be long distance running, it might be climbing trees, whatever it is, have a thing, right? And then
can I just add a quick note into that?
yes,
Because my wife and I was doing a parenting course last night, and we were there talking about what they call self-care in
yeah,
the program, and how important that is. And the example I gave, how often do you see a toddler walking? It's like they don't walk anywhere. They run everywhere. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just it's built into our hardware to move. We are built to move.
yeah,
And then for people who are
yeah,
sitting in an office most of the day and don't move and think they can just get into a car, roll home, and then sit on the couch and watch a movie and then be happy and energetic and fulfilled, it's just not going to happen. We have to move the body. So I really appreciate you sharing that as a tool. I can definitely go along with that one. So you said you had another one.
yeah. I went. I have I started on the personal development journey in my 20s, where it was started by finding late night TV before the internet was a big part of any of our lives. And Tony Robbins used to advertise this box set of CDs that were just audio. And it was for me at the time in my early 20s, it was incredibly expensive. It was $350 or $400 or something that I didn't have. And I remember the decision, how hard the deliberation was to make the decision to spend that kind of money to order this. But I had a dream that I could be something bigger than what life looked like for me at the time, coming from a working class family with no education and thinking, what, I got to have something. It struck me as just something I had to do. At the time, I was a sales guy driving around from appointment to appointment to appointment, sometimes 5 or 6 a day. And so I had a lot of time, windshield time. And I would just play the Tony Robbins CDs over and over and over, and it sank in. I've never been to a Tony Robbins seminar. I've not really bought much since then. And this was like one of his first, marketing offerings. This is way back. And it transformed my thinking. Of course, there was value in his teachings right off the bat. It was profoundly, I would recommend, his teaching to anyone. But what it also did is it sparked an interest in personal growth and development. And it led me to finding books like Think and Grow Rich, which then I would read a book like that and I'd say, well, who inspired that person? How'd they come up with that? And then I would do some research and find out, oh, they're really just learned from this person. And I would go read that person's book or books, and then so on and so on. And it led me way back. And I kept going back in time to what led me back into the scriptures, right? Whether they be Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, yogic, Vedantic, all of those, and even some of the Christian mystics and so on. And so and then I got to fast forward and then marry those concepts with newer books like The Field by Lynn McTaggart, that is the marriage of quantum physics, which is really starting to support some of the ancient spiritual concepts, right? Science is now saying, yeah, well, this is actually happening, which is amazing. And so one of the books that I went back to in trying to recover from this emotional mental breakdown was a book called Three Magic Words. And I won't give away the punchline, what the three magic words are, but that book walks you through a series of concepts that lead you to a very big breakthrough, aha, at the very end of the book, which is Three Magic Words. It's a short, easy book. I'd recommend it to anyone. But through all of this, yes?
Have you got the author?
The author, yes. Let me, man, I have too many
I will put
books.
I will put it in notes afterwards.
But I can find it right now. I will pull this up because I have it right here, and I'll tell you what it is.
We'll put it in the show notes.
It is an American author that goes by U.S. Andersen. I think it's Ewell, Uells Andersen. Um,
Thank you.
and through, I guess where I'm going with this is that book was very helpful. I had read it many times in my 20s, 30s, whatever. But then it came back up for me in this kind of recovery period here, and it reminded me of the power of intention and the power of the over self. The kind of the idea that we are so much more than this physical form and this little monkey mind, which tapped me back into really, really being open to some of the spiritual principles or just more esoteric principles that really can be transformative. And I have, when I was younger, developed a little bit of how do I take all of this information from all these books and put it into a little recipe. I'm very big on taking complex things and making them as simple as possible. It's something I just enjoy doing, and it's helped me in business. But I boiled all this down to three things that I follow now, which is vision, belief, and action. And I call this the recipe for success in whatever it is I'm trying to do. If I can establish enough of a vision or clarity and a picture to what it is that I want to see or be or live into or experience, and really go into a daydream and a mental picturing of it to almost to the point where I can see myself there. I can taste it, feel it, touch it, and really spend that time on it. I began to develop some belief that that's actually occurring, that it's possible, that it's right there. It's just on its way to me, that cultivating that faith or that belief that it's possible. And once that occurs, I begin to just take action based in that belief. Every day is just another step closer in the direction of what my dream is, what my vision is. And that little recipe is something I turned back to as well. As I said, okay, here I am at rock bottom. I blew everything up. Most of my company doesn't want me around. What do I do? Well, I had some teachers' help. I had therapy. I had things like that. But I also had to go back to, well, it's time to write a new script. It's time to write a new, paint a new picture, right? I know it's more difficult for others, some than others, to envision things, but you can still have a desire, tap into that. And I say, what is your heart's desire? The idea that desire being a word coming from Latin that says desire of the Father. If you believe in God, if not, call it the universe, but that something was planted in your heart that is meant for you. And that if you can tap into that, turn it into a picture, something that you can look forward to, use that little recipe and it will lead you somewhere. And typically it's bigger and better than you ever imagined.
Wonderful. What are you familiar with Wallace D. Wattles?
I love Wallace Wattles.
Yeah, the
I almost
science.
mentioned that because
Yeah.
the Science of Getting Rich is like
Science.
hands down my favorite book.
I'm reading it again and again and again.
I didn't bring it
When you
up
were talking, that's
honestly.
what I heard. Oh, that's
Yeah,
Wallace D. Wattles.
yeah. So when I didn't bring it up because here's why. When you say Think and Grow Rich, most people have heard of that book and it doesn't freak them out. When you say The Science of Getting Rich, for me, if people aren't familiar with the kind of the way that Wallace D. Wattles writes that, you think it's just some like mechanism to getting rich with money and greedy and everything, and it's really not. It's rich in life, right? Not necessarily even not that money's a bad thing, but yes, I will tell you that is probably my number one favorite book of all time. Yeah. So thanks for bringing it up.
I bought a version. He wrote only 3 books in his life, and I have the book version that has all 3 in one book. So it's the science of getting rich. There's a science of being great, and then there's a science of being well. I think well, I might be slightly wrong on the titles, but it's not just about money.
Yeah.
It's also about being well as a human being. So thank you for that. That's
Yeah,
really
man.
awesome, really practical stuff, and I really like the background that you gave us with those things as well. So really valuable. We will put all that information in the show notes. So my last questions that I love finishing with, because I love transformation. I like change too,
Oh,
as
me
long as it's
too.
positive, but transformation, if I can get transformation, I will take that over change in any day. So whatever transformation means to you, can you share us a brief little story of them? You already told us a story of transformation. Can is there another story in there? It can be way back early
Yeah,
in life.
yeah. I will. This one's simple, and maybe it's less detailed. So I think it's good because we're kind of coming up at the end of the hour, and in this I can keep it short. And you can tell I like to talk, so I got to be careful here. Um, The one of the things that I found was most transformative for me was when I had this aha moment that I was thinking about the distinction between what makes a person a good person versus a bad person, right? And so, as an example, take a positive, inspirational leader versus, let's say, a murderer, right? And I had heard something said along the way, maybe it was Shakespeare or I don't remember, said man does not have the ability to act in anything that they believe to be other than good, right? So then you go, well, how does somebody commit murder? Well, because it's good for them. It's good for they in that moment feel like this is good for me to murder that person, right? So then I began to extrapolate, okay, well, if that's true, then the distinction between a murderer and somebody that we might call a wonderful, great person is just how many people that they're operating in good for, right? So a big part of my transformational experience as a human being was recognizing that I was going to get more out of life by seeking to serve as many people as possible. And that the more good for the more people, the more truth there is to the idea of goodness, right? And again, without putting judgment on right or wrong, good or bad, but just the idea that I started to move away from the idea of always thinking about what was good for me and began thinking about what is good for others. And then that began to kind of extrapolate and grow into the idea of what truly could a great life look like. It's how many people can I serve in a positive way, right? And then I started to have ideas like, well, what's the difference between a slave and a king? Hypothetical terms, right? Well, the slave wakes up every day being forced to serve. The king, a good king, wakes up every day saying, how many people can I serve? Or how do I serve, right? Choosing to serve. And so really that led me back to service. My life, if I can dedicate my life to service, I will have a life of joy. I will have a life of abundance. I will have a life of fulfillment. And all I have to do is wake up every day and say, universe, how can I serve today? Right. And then go with the flow. And so that really was a transformative bit of thinking for me that led me to understand that, and then to take it a step further, I had to spend a lot of time thinking about love being the core essence of everything, like the engine of the universe, right? If I really, really boiled it down, the symbiotic nature of symbiosis that exists in nature and this kind of things serving each other in nature, it all seems like this effervescence of love. And so I spent time saying, well, what's the verb tense of love? What's love in action? What is that word? And that led me back to the word service. And so in my opinion, service is the action, love in action, right? So again, that's the most transformative thing that I can think of for this context here, that is not necessarily a little story based on a moment in time, other than this thinking that I was doing that led me to understand that my highest purpose is to serve. And it sounds strange, but boy, it really, really works for me. It really does lead to a feeling of abundance. If you're not thinking about what's in it for me, but just thinking about what's in it for me is the actual action of what's in it for them.
That is so beautiful. And I think we're just going to finish on that note because I don't have anything of value to add on top of that. I'm just going to say thank you so much, Derek, for sharing so openly with me and then like with the audience. And thank you to our audience today for tuning into this. I really hope that you found something of value in this conversation today. So thank you, Derek, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success. If you have stories of how mental fitness has benefited you that you are happy to share, go to my website, mikael.nz, click on podcast and fill in the guest application form. If you want direct support from me utilizing my 40 years of mental fitness learning and practice, email me at coach@mikael.nz or message me on LinkedIn. Any feedback, review, share, follow, like, or any other good stuff is of course appreciated. Thank you for listening to Mental Fitness, the Gateway to Success podcast. I'm your host, Mikael Nielsen.